Hello everyone, this is Kiarra again. I am making this video to present my piece that I created in 2012. It is called Give Me the Pretty Doll. I framed it so it kind of has a glare on it, but I'll show you the original piece in a picture at the end. But like I said, it has watercolor, it's part collage, and it has marker as well. The original size is 9 by 12, but it's bigger in the frame. So I'm going to tell you about the experiment that inspired this piece. I'm going to say most of it from memory and most of it from notes on my phone and in a notebook. So this experiment was begun by black psychologists named Dr. Kenneth and Mamie Clark. They were married, and the experiments took place in the 1940s, but it was utilized for the argument of Brown versus the Board of Education. And Dr. Kenneth and Dr. Mamie, they wanted to see the psychological effects that segregation had on the minds of black children. So they interviewed about 300 children from the ages of 6 to 9, and they had 2 dolls on the table. One doll was white and one doll was black. Even though the dolls looked exactly the same, their skin color was different. So they interviewed 300 children of African descent, and they asked them the questions in this order. And these were the questions. Show me the pretty doll. No. Show me the doll that you like best or that you'd like to play with. Show me the doll that is the nice doll. Show me the doll that looks bad. Give me the doll that looks like a white child. Give me the doll that looks like a colored child. Give me the doll that looks like a Negro child. And give me the doll that looks like you. So, one incident which I find highly disturbing was when the question to this little boy in Arkansas, in the rural part of Arkansas, when he was asked which doll looked most like him, he smiled and he pointed to the brown doll and said, "That's a nigger, I'm a nigger." And that disturbed Dr. Clark. That disturbed me as well, but that's because I've worked with children and I've heard them call themselves that before, and I've heard them talk about each other before, like, your hair is so nappy, my hair is so nappy, I'm gonna cut all this nappy stuff out. Like, come on now, why are you talking bad about yourself? But that's what happened. So that incident was different from some other incidences, some other, oh my god, I can't even, okay, cut that out. Anyways, in other parts of the experiment, they had children refusing to answer the question and also running out of the room crying. And I believe that because I had a little girl I was working with, and she had really long weave. It was summertime, and her weave got taken out, and she was wearing a hoodie in 100-degree weather. And I told her that she needed to wear her natural hair because this isn't going to work. You're not going to wear a hoodie all summer long. And so I said I would give her $1. She came. She's like, "Miss Kiarra, may I have my $1? I'm wearing my natural hair." She didn't like it anyways. I was like, "You have to learn to love how your natural hair is," I told her. She cried. She cried nonstop for 2 hours because she did not want to love her hair. So it's stuff like that that's just really stands out to you. And that's why when you see the answers that the children gave in this experiment, don't be too surprised. So it said in 1950, 44% said the white doll looks like them. That makes sense because I had a child I worked with who was maybe one shade lighter than me, and I'm not light skinned. I'm like kind of dark, not really dark, but I'm still dark. She said, "I'm light skinned." I'm like, "You're not light skinned." She's like, "Yes, I am. I'm light. I'm really, really light. I'm just so light skinned." I'm like, okay. So you hate yourself so much that you've gotten to the point where you really don't believe that your skin color is the skin color that it is? That's just crazy. And then it says, in South Carolina in 1950, 63% said the white doll was the nice one. And in 2005, this girl created a documentary called A Girl Like Me. She asked 21 children, and 71% said the white doll was a nice one. In 2009, they did the experiment again, and the question was, which doll is pretty? The boys said both of the dolls were pretty, but 47% of the black girls said that the white doll was the pretty one. So they say that this is because of segregation, because the children felt isolated. They felt like they were just set apart from everybody else, and that they just felt so disturbed and like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I drink over there? Why can't I use that restaurant? Why, Daddy? Why, Mommy? Why? But then you have to think of the children who were in the integrated schools. I'm sure they were going through an even worse experience than the children in the segregation, because you're right there in the middle of a place. Nobody wants you there. People are calling you names. They're protesting outside of your school. You're looking in your history book. You can't find anything about yourself in your history book. And I know this from my own personal experience, because I went to a mostly white school. There were about 5 blacks in my whole school, and anything I found in my history book, it did not do black people any justice at all. Like, the storybooks about anybody from Africa, you were either a cannibal, you didn't have a religion, you killed people, you didn't know how to read, you didn't know anything. And this was in 1st grade, in my little storybooks. I even have a history book from the 6th grade, and I'm going to read some of it to you. It's about Phyllis Wheatley. So this is the one black person in here, in this book, that I recognize, that I kind of knew about. But it's like, oh, she's running through the jungles of Western Africa, terror gripping her heart. She's about to be kidnapped by men. No, it says men from another tribe were chasing her, intent on selling her. I'm like, how do you know the process of how Phyllis Wheatley got kidnapped? Like, was it really men from another tribe, or what? How do you know? How do you know that? She never talked about it. And then it says, the Wheatleys treated the girl like a second daughter, and they named her Phyllis Wheatley. Like, number one, if she was a second daughter, why is she still enslaved? Why are you keeping her in a place where she's still enslaved? Why don't you take her to another country so she can live a full lifestyle, a country where she can live completely free without being enslaved? And you're saying, oh, she was named Phyllis Wheatley. You didn't mention that she was named after the ship that brought her there, the Phyllis. Then they have, Phyllis did not feel bitter that she was a slave, but thankful because her slavery had given her a chance to hear about Christ and accept him as her savior. So I guess you didn't hear about her poems where she's talking about, I hope nobody feels the sway of tyranny and have to end up in the situation that I ended up in, where I'm enslaved. So it's stuff like that the children in the integrated schools had to deal with, and the children in the segregated schools had to deal with as well. So I don't think the problem was integration or segregation. The problem was that we're trying to get somebody who hates us to accept us. But it's never going to happen. It was never going to happen. There's still racists out here now. So you can't love yourself if you're always looking outside of people who aren't you to love you. You have to love yourself. And that is why we're having so many problems as black people now, because we're not loving ourselves. They're like, oh, no, it's not. I'm like, no, you're not loving yourself. You aren't loving yourself. I've spoken to elders that lived in segregated communities, and they have one of the highest levels of self-esteem I've ever seen in my life. Why? Because they had doctors who looked like them. So just because the history book says, oh, you don't have the brain to become a doctor. Well, there's a black doctor next door, and there's a black professor down the street, and there's black carpenters to build my school, and there's black volunteers, like in Kinloch. When they didn't have a police force, they volunteered for about a year, a volunteer police force. And this was, I don't know if it was the 20s, 30s, but they had stuff like that. Because when you love yourself, you're going to take care of yourself. When you love yourself, you're going to treat people that look like you with respect, and you're also going to treat others who don't look like you with respect. So that is the main core of racism. The people hate themselves so much that they feel so inferior to the whole world that they have to destroy the whole world. So, that is why the main problem of the Clark doll experiment was you're not creating the positive images for the children to see themselves as. You just have, like, okay, they're picking the pretty doll. They're like, oh, it's the white doll, it's the pretty doll. Well, why don't you bring them around black people who are beautiful? Why don't you bring them around black people who are doing something, instead of always trying to give them role models that don't look anything like them and don't want to be around them at all? But that's just me. Because when we were in segregation, we had our own stuff. You have the Ville. The Ville had its own stuff. You had colleges people were building. They built it with their own hands. But for some reason, now we don't believe that we can build anything, even though we built things in the past. So that is why I create art about Black history, because for some reason these children's history books aren't mentioning anything about Black people at all. I don't know. They mention Black people, but if they had the history book that I had, and they don't have anybody outside telling them an accurate history of themselves, or have any people around them that are teaching them to love themselves, they're just going to be lost. It's like Dr. John Henrik Clarke, when he asked one of his teachers, where can I learn about the history of the African? The teacher told him that Africans had no history. But of course he went to Schomburg, and Schomburg told him, read about global history and then read about your history. Because Dr. John Henrik Clarke is known for writing books about the history of people of African descent in a global context. So it is not the problem of racism. It is the problem you're not taking the time to love yourself. Because when you do, you won't say, I want to integrate your school. I want to integrate this fountain. This fountain says white and black fountain. I want to drink from your fountain. No, don't even care about their fountain. Just make your own fountain. Build your own school. You don't need their fountain. You have your own. You have your own artistic ability to do that stuff. To create the buildings. To create the organizations. That's how we've gotten so far. So we must not let that go. And people say, well, because you're separating from everybody else, that's a bad thing. No, because when you love yourself, the world will be a better place. When you love yourself in a healthy way, then you're not taking from anybody else. You're only adding to the world. You're only creating a better world. So, that is my rant, which I guess led away from my piece. But, as I said, I firmly believe this because I'm around children who don't love themselves and are going to become adults who don't love themselves. And I would like to stop that in the bud by creating these images for people to see. So I will list the price of this piece at the end of my video. You can visit my website, which I will also put below. And thank you for watching this video, and have a lovely day. Thank you.